Welcome to Talk South Asian to me. My name is Mashal.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you and leave what doesn't.
Awesome. Let's get into it. So today, our letter is E. Michelle, do you want to do the honors of revealing our pod topic today?
Yes, so our pod topic is freezing eggs.
Yay.
Ooh, I'm excited to learn about this more
Me
with our
too.
wonderful guest.
Expert guest speaker. And that is Kiran Ponada. Kiran is a second-generation Indian American born and raised in New York City. She's a mental health advocate and passionate about destigmatizing mental health across all cultures and backgrounds, especially in her own South Asian community. She's a graduate of New York University and has worked in the environmental and social justice spaces until she transitioned to the federal IT contract space. Kiran, hi. Welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you both. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and I'm really happy to talk about my egg freezing experience with you. This is not a topic that's talked about enough in our community, so happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you here and happy you reached out to us to talk about this because we're definitely not experts by any means in this. And you're our guest expert today on this topic. So really excited to hear about, freezing eggs, your experience, and all the information you've learned along the journey. Yeah, so let's get started then. I guess our first question to you really is, a basic one. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
As you two probably have experienced yourself, I grew up with a very strong bicultural identity. I would say that I'm 60% Indian, 40% American, but even that percentage breakdown caused a lot of confusion and complications in my life. But at the same time, it was a very rich upbringing that I'm grateful for.
That's beautifully put. Yeah, we've often talked about in our podcast the bicultural experience and that the individual struggle, but also a collective struggle that we all seem to have with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. So the next question we have is, can you define and explain what the process of freezing your eggs looks like?
Sure. So it's unofficially actually starts even before the actual hormonal injection part. So I actually chose to freeze my eggs in Spain because it is cheaper to do in Spain. It is much, much cheaper, actually, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So a few months before, I actually reached out to the clinic, and they actually recommended to me to take certain vitamins that help with like egg quality. So that happens about 3 months before. And then a month before, from the States, actually went to my gynecologist, got an ovarian ultrasound done, and then sent that to the clinic in Spain so that they could see that everything was okay and that, I was fit enough to proceed with the procedure. And then after that, while in the States, sometimes you actually need to take birth control, which is what I needed to do. And the purpose of that is to time the ovulation so that when they do the actual retrieval, the timing works out the way that we want it to. And then, of course, once I actually got to Spain, that's when they do another ultrasound scan to just see where the ovaries are at before the hormonal injections are started. And then that's when the actual hormonal injection process begins. And I believe it is similar to IVF in the sense that the same hormones are used during that process. So follicle stimulating hormone taken for about 2 weeks straight, and they actually have to be self-administered shots. And that was a bit of a nerve-wracking experience. They did tell me briefly how to do it. But then while I was there, I actually video chatted my friend that was a nurse in New York, and I just asked her, like, am I doing this right? And, just did it on my, just demonstrated to her how, if I was doing it right. So that goes on for 2 weeks. And then a couple of days in midway is when you introduce ovulation blocking shots. So because our bodies are just naturally programmed to just release the eggs on their own, there's a certain type of shot that you need to take to prevent that from happening. So that is introduced 2-3 days before is when you actually not 2-3 a day before is when I took the trigger shot, which actually gives the eggs the final push of development before the extraction. And then the day of I was under anesthesia, so asleep the entire time, and then they extract the eggs. After the eggs are extracted, somebody looks at them to kind of verify the egg quality, because not every egg extracted is mature enough to freeze. And then after that, they freeze them.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
yeah.
Quite a process.
Yeah.
But
and this
sorry,
I was
go
just
ahead.
saying, like, this is like the first time I'm learning about these steps. Like, I feel like
Me
I haven't
too.
really, like, you were absolutely right on how this hasn't really been talked about, in
Mm-hmm.
our society in general too, but especially in our community. But keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, yeah, no worries. And yeah, I think that's it, and it can, the way people react can be different. I just wanted to point that out, because I actually had 2 cycles done. I had one cycle in May, and I had another one in August. In May, I felt pretty okay, but in August, they actually doubled the hormones to hopefully get more of a better result. And I felt horrible. I was like ill. I could not even did not even have the energy to make myself a meal. And that doesn't always happen, but that can happen to some women. And I've heard similar for women.
Wow. Yeah. I suppose, there has to be some level of variability. It's the same with, menstrual cycles and whatnot, right? The hormones just affect everyone a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness. I'm curious about something you said. You said that these cycles that you did, May and August. Feel free to, anything we talk about today, feel free to just decline answering things you don't want to answer. But I'm curious why you chose to do 2 cycles, like just to have more options, like viable options, or.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I guess part of it, there's always that kind of emotional, psychological element where there is no, as far as I know from the research, there is no X number that is considered the safe amount. But for me, when I did it in May, I think I got about 8 eggs, and I just did not feel I felt like, no, this is not comforting enough for me. So that's why I decided to go for a second round.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
And
curious, is that, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, did that require you to go back out to Spain and do the process over?
Could you repeat that?
Sure. I was just asking if that required you to do the process over and go back out to Spain and, just kind of repeat the process again.
Yeah. So actually, it was lucky in the sense that, so last May, I actually quit my job. So last year was a very transformative year for me personally. I quit my job, and I was like, okay, I'm going to travel and I'm going to focus on this thing for myself. So the plan 5 months, and Spain was one of my first stops. And when I got there, and the result was not as I'd hoped, I was like, okay, I'm just going to continue on with my travels without going back home to New York. So I continued on with my travels, and then I came back. So the experience was bookended by, egg freezing, one cycle of egg freezing in the beginning and one cycle in the end. Yeah.
So how much time did you spend in Spain, total, for one cycle?
Yeah. So you don't need to, technically, egg freezing from start, the actual hormonal injections to retrieval is about 2 weeks. But for me, I decided to stay a little bit longer in May because I just wanted to kind of get comfortable, because it's a new country. It's not really, it's not home. So I just wanted to make sure, because obviously experience like this, as low stress as you can be, the better. So I was lucky to be able to stay longer. So I stayed about 2 months in May and then in August.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And how did you come to know about, the option of like freezing your eggs, and ultimately, if it's not too personal, what led you to make that decision?
Sure. Well, I'm 37 now. When I was in my early 30s, I heard about other women doing it, and although to be honest, I'd only ever heard of white women doing this. I've never really heard of a woman of color talk about this experience. Forget South Asian women. So I had heard that. I'd heard it being talked about, and I knew like, okay, this is probably something I need to think about because I'm single. So this is something I need to seriously consider. And then when I went to my gynecologist at the time, she told me, she's like, you should think about it. It's better to do it earlier because your egg quality is better when you're younger. So just think about it. And then I just sort of delayed. I wish I hadn't. I honestly wish I had done this earlier. But ultimately, I decided, okay, 36 is the year that I'm gonna get it done.
Mm.
So, the next question we have is that if you're also comfortable sharing with us about this as well, is that what do the financial costs look like for this process?
Sure. So I actually have it written down here. In Spain, it is much more affordable, actually. So I paid about $8,000 to do 2 cycles,
Okay.
and that includes 5 years of storage, which is typically not included when you get it done in the States. And that $8,000 also includes medication. So, and it seems like a lot because it is a lot. But if you were to compare it to how much it costs to get it done in America, like wait until I tell you the cost of that, it can be up to $14,000 for just 1 cycle.
Wow.
That like upwards. A lot of women need 2. I needed 2, so that would be $38K for 2 cycles. So yeah, so that's why I got it done in Spain.
And I'm curious, is there a particular reason, like of any country, Spain in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of countries that do it in Spain. Sorry, in Europe, but Spain is especially good because I think they have very progressive reproductive. Politically, it is a better environment. The technology and the research and development into reproductive technology is more advanced. So that was one reason. And not to get too political, but like there are some, with everything going on now in the
Right.
States, I'm kind of
Yeah.
glad that I did it in Spain because I just don't know what's going to change in the next
Right.
couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Spain is a leader in that, and I'm happy I got it done there.
Yeah,
Sounds
definitely.
like you did a lot of homework and research, so we really appreciate you sharing your experience and what you've also found when it comes to like comparing numbers, looking into the research and who are the leaders, what countries are the leaders in this process.
Yeah.
No,
And speaking of, like the differences that you found in your research, I'm curious to hear, other than, politically and financial cost, are there other pros and cons in going into making that decision between having the procedure here versus somewhere abroad?
yeah, I mean, there's definitely one big con, which is if I were to need to use the eggs, it would be a little bit of a challenging situation. So they do transport them, actually,
Okay.
but there is risk involved with transportation because sometimes the quality, something might happen in transit. And again, if I needed to use them, if I needed, IVF or whatever, I would have to go back there to do it. It is cheaper to do in Spain too, IVF, much, much cheaper. But then IVF is not necessarily an overnight process. It could take time.
Right.
So you could end up being there for a while. But yeah, that's a bit of a bummer, that con, but I think the benefits were outweighing the cons in this case.
I just have a quick follow-up question. So I know you touched on this a little bit. So like the next step is after storage, right? If someone would like to use their eggs that were frozen in this process, the next step would be IVF. Like that's kind of like starting that process would be the next step.
Yes, yeah. There would be there would be IVF, or some people could get them fertilized by a donor. I've not thought that far ahead, but
Sure.
yeah. So yep, IVF would be the next step.
And just something that I know, like this is going beyond our topic, but IVF, like you mentioned, is like a longer process that might require other procedures, right? Like injections and hormonal medications that might be required as well for that process.
Yeah, so I probably should have looked into that a little bit more,
No,
but
it's okay.
as far as I know, yeah, that's how it would work.
Okay. All right. So our next question is, once you made your decision or you kind of went through this process and this procedure, how did your loved ones and or community respond?
Sure. I will start with a positive first, and then later on I'll get into the negative. So I was really lucky to have a lot of my close family be supportive, especially my mom and my brother. And my brother was awesome because I had confided in him that why aren't there any other South Asian women that have done this? Like, why have I not heard of anyone? I would have loved to talk to somebody about this. So, because I felt very alone. And then he was the one that actually told me, like, you should talk about this, like, go on TikTok and talk about this. So a huge reason why I'm talking about this is because he encouraged me. So he was very supportive. I was lucky to have that. And then, yeah, of course, a lot of my close friends were very supportive. And then, after so I think I'd mentioned after my first round in May, I traveled a bit. And then I decided to go to India because I wasn't working at the time, so I had a lot of time to spend time with my family in India, which is rare when you're working. So I went and I sort of as like an experiment, but also because I wanted to, I told some people in India, I told some of my cousins, my female cousins, and many were very supportive and understanding. And then for others, it was like just an incomprehensible thing. Like it doesn't even compute, if that makes sense. Because, most people, marry early, and this is not really something that they need to think about. So when I was explaining this to them, it was just not grasping the concept at all. And then other people were like, don't tell anyone that you're doing this. Don't talk about this. And as soon as they said that, I was like, yeah, it just kind of lit the fire even more. Whereas like, I absolutely have to talk about this because, it's changing. Things are changing in India as well, where, not everyone is marrying as early as before. And this is probably something that's going to get more popular. So if nobody's talking about it, then how do people know that this is an option?
Right.
So, yeah. So I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes the comments were hurtful, but thankfully I got past that because I just tried to focus on the support and encouragement that I was getting from other people. So, yeah.
No, it's really, really inspiring to see how you use that, all the negativity that you did face in your community as like fuel to your fire and wanting a desire to speak about it. It's very inspiring and admirable. I'm sure it required a lot of strength on your part to really look past all of that and be like, okay, there's like a bigger purpose I have here too, which is to share my story and normalize this, because you're right, it is not talked about. So very, very admirable. Kudos
Thank
to you.
I really appreciate it. And and just to add to that, there were some younger people, and I got a few messages from some of my really young cousins in India that are Gen Z, and they were so appreciative. And then I just realized, like, wow, there's such a shift in the thinking from my parents' generation to Gen Z in India, which was really, really like, it just gave me goosebumps, and it was very, very like inspiring and encouraging. So yeah.
Yes. You have people that look up to you. Yeah. You're breaking cycles, breaking barriers.
Breaking generational cycles.
Woo-hoo.
That's what we're all doing, right?
Right. It's amazing.
And there's never enough encouragement. So to share my piece of encouragement, I think that is just so, so courageous and brave too. Especially like being in India and hearing maybe some of the negative things, despite that, being able to show up and keep showing up and take the encouragement, choose to focus on the support, the positivity, and put yourself out there like that, because it is a vulnerable journey. And I mean, I think that's really amazing. And I'm sure that there's been a lot of emotions tied up in this journey for you, but another thank you from both of us for being out here spreading, the word and destigmatizing it for everybody.
Thank you. So kind. And yeah, that's like the main thing, just destigmatize. So there's less shame. We don't want shame.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. So, to talk a little bit more about this stigma, though, we're curious to hear with the parts that you're wanting to share, like, what did that stigma look like that you did face, and how did you respond, especially to that?
So yeah, I mean, I had a couple people tell me, they didn't know that I was gonna talk about it in like TikToks or a podcast, but when they told me, don't tell anybody that you're doing this, I knew that I could not convince them. I tried, and I think this is a battle that we all face. I'm sure you have faced, where there some. I don't want to paint a broad brush for an entire generation, because I know that there are people in the older generations that understand. But I did try a little bit, where I just said, this is important to talk about. What if there's somebody else that we know that needs to do this and they don't know that they can do this? So I just said a little bit about that. And then I would just get like a, kind of a brush off, but no real like constructive dialogue after that.
Yeah.
But I expected that, to be honest. So it was all right.
Yeah. You expected to receive like some level of not understanding kind of the process, your decision, the why, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you said, right? It's just such a different experience for previous generations, and the expectations that this might not even be something that they've ever thought about. And anything new is always a little bit challenging for people, especially if it's something that feels, scary.
Yeah, I agree. And, I just hope that as I get older, my thinking is flexible and I'm open to new ideas.
Definitely. So, I know. Fingers crossed. Team breaking generational trauma. We're all about it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Just to like a follow-up comment that I had to Kiran from that previous answer was like, I love how you kind of explain how where exactly you want to tap your energy into, right? So like you're not fully focused and convincing the people who don't want to accept where you're coming from and what your decision is, but you're tapping your energy and feeling your fire with the people who are providing you that love and support, continuously encourage you. So I love that, like you chose where you want to put your energy into, and that's very powerful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, we have to after a while, right? Otherwise that negativity just weighs you down.
Right.
And I still struggle with it sometimes. There are periods where, I kind of think about the negative, feedback a little more than I would like to. But yeah.
And that's very valid. Yeah. Like, like you said, it hasn't been talked about much. It hasn't been normalized. It hasn't been destigmatized. So, you talking about this also makes you a pioneer in a way, like one of the few that have really spoken up about this. So we really appreciate it. And I think that comes with a lot of heaviness and those
Yeah.
And
emotions that,
loneliness.
yes, right.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's why just if at least one person can feel less alone from me talking about this
Right.
experience, then
Yeah.
I'm happy.
And I hope you receive, some of those data points. I mean, the women out there who do kind of reach out and be like, yeah, you know what, that was my experience too. I did it. Because that, hopefully that would make you feel less lonely too. Being a pioneer is definitely hard in that aspect.
For sure.
Thank you.
So kind of moving forward with, talking about the process of freezing your eggs and just the decision that you made and maybe the responses that you received, or when you were first researching about it or talking to people about it, what do you feel like are some common myths and misconceptions about this procedure and freezing your eggs?
Well, one bit of an unfortunate thing is that it's not necessarily a guarantee or an insurance policy.
Right.
I think it improves your chances greatly, but it should not be seen as something that will guarantee you a child in the future.
Right.
But the technology is improving. From whatever I researched, I think in the past, whenever they thawed the eggs, the chance of that egg being destroyed was higher. But now the technology has advanced where there's less likelihood of that happening.
Okay.
Which is reassuring. But I would say that, yeah, yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Right.
And if someone wanted to start considering freezing their eggs, where would you recommend they start?
Well, hopefully, if you know someone that has done it before, and hopefully they're open to talking to you about their experience, I think that's really helpful, and that is something that I wish I had. But if not, definitely go online and look for resources, see who else has been talking about it, and then of course see your gynecologist. Typically, the gynecologist will kind of give you a referral to a proper fertility clinic in which you can have a consultation. Yeah, and if it is expensive, which unfortunately it is, if it is within your means, to consider doing it abroad. And I know that even that is difficult for a lot of people. So, but yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Okay. And is there, if you could give any advice apart from the things that you've already shared, is there anything that you would advise them or want them to know?
Yeah, I think, if this is something, do you mean with regards to egg freezing or in general?
In general.
Oh, in general? Okay. One thing I just love telling, I sound like some kind of old person, but I love telling younger women in their 20s, especially South Asian women, to try not to get so hung up on timelines, because sometimes with the weight of our culture, people end up making the wrong decision because they're in a hurry to meet a timeline. So I really like telling younger women that, just as much as you can, try to free yourself from that whether it's going to therapy or other kind of inner work, whatever it is that you need to do to kind of free yourself from that. Yeah, that is like the main thing that I would tell the younger people.
That's beautifully put. Yeah.
It's really good advice because I feel like the timeline not only sometimes can be drilled in through your own conversations or your own dreams and visions, but also like the vision and dreams that your family might have for you. And especially in our culture, right? Giving that timeline to you, when to get married, when to have kids, what, sometimes choosing the career that you should pursue. So that's really, really good advice because I feel like the timeline is very related to, when it comes to these decisions, whether like going through this procedure or like other decisions that may be related, like finding someone, right? All those things can play a role and can cause stress and anxiety. So that's really, really helpful and good advice. So I have a related question. The next question is a little bit related, but it's more fun. So like the next questions are more fun. Like they don't have to be related to the topic, but they can be if you would like. So this question is that if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
So I would say, in general, like so many of us, I think many of us have experienced mental health struggles. So one of the main things I would tell myself at that age is that you're not crazy for whatever mental health struggles you're experiencing. This is very natural and normal. And it probably makes you more sane than a lot of other people out there that don't even think about, you
Right.
know, so yeah, I struggled with anxiety when I was younger. So yeah, I think I would tell myself that. And then I think on a lighter side, I would just tell myself just to have more fun, honestly. Because, again, in our culture, there's this thing where, okay, like study hard, get a good job, right? So sometimes it's hard for us to just embrace the idea of just having fun and not just working towards a goal all the time. And it's not to say that I didn't have fun growing up, but I feel like I could have done a little. You can have fun even now. There's no age limit for fun, but I would tell myself, yeah, like just do more things that bring you joy and have more fun.
I like that.
I love it. Always good advice for any age,
Right.
isn't it?
Right.
Do things that bring you more joy. I love it.
Right. And slow down. I feel like I am guilty of that. Like just wanting to think about the next step, the next goal. Like, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? I'm still working on that. It's like, it's okay to not think about what's next and just slow down and have fun. Relax.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah, I agree.
I feel like we could sit here and write a lot of advice to our past selves. Like 1, 2, 3, and then we get to like 100 real fast. It's okay. That's a life lived, right? We learn our lessons through lived life.
Absolutely.
Well, our last question for today is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Anything related to the topic or not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you're a younger woman in your 20s, and you know for certain that you want to have children, or you're kind of on the fence, but you think you might, I would say just think about doing this and kind of think about it as like a 401k, something that you're doing, your present self is doing for your future self. And yeah, I would suggest that. And then, yeah, just in general, this whatever I said earlier, don't get hung up on milestones and have fun. And I like what you said, Mashal, which is slow down. I'll piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing today. And honestly, I'll speak for myself. I feel like I've learned a lot about this topic.
Yes, me too.
I mean, it's like you said, right? This is such an important topic, and there's literally no awareness on this. And it's so important to keep spreading the word. And we appreciate, brave people like you who are willing to talk about these vulnerable things and make the world, our community, a better place for our generation and the next. So thank you so much for reaching out to us. And it was a pleasure getting to, speak with you and learn about freezing eggs.
Thank you so much. And likewise to the both of you, like starting a podcast about mental health that is very much needed. And, like I said, I've listened to many of your episodes and they're so relatable. So
thank you.
So you're also doing like really important work, and thank you.
No, we really appreciate it.
That.
Yeah. And, like you said, like this is something that not only isn't talked about in our community, but like in society in general, right? Like you said, like only white women are speaking about it. But I feel like even then, like there's still lacking, like, women in society in general talking about this or being more upfront about these procedures, because there is a societal stigma, not just like a South Asian stigma, I feel. So, you're not only breaking like these cycles and generational cycles like within our community, but like in our larger community too. So kudos to you. And we really appreciate you sharing your story, being vulnerable and having our and teaching our listeners about your experience all the positive, the pros and cons of everything. We love your honesty and we really appreciated that.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Yeah. So I guess I can wrap us up. So, our listeners, if anything resonated with you from today's podcast episode, please, you can reach out to us through our email, which is talksouthasiantome@gmail.com. Or you can also reach out to our social media pages. Our handle is @talksouthasiantome. And we will see you in our next episode. All right.